share this video with a friend or two or 10,000 so we can have a very lively discussion. Remember to share your questions and comments so we can put them to our guests. All right, people. Now, it's that time of year again when we welcome entries for the JIS Heritage Competitions. That's your essay, poster, and photo competitions. The essay is for primary level students, the poster competition is for your secondary level students, and the photo competition is for our tertiary students. This year's question or subject matter involves the also topical issue of the road to republic status. The essay competition asks students aged 9 to 12 to answer the question, should Jamaica remain under the British monarchy or become a fully independent republic? They are to write a 400-word essay answering that question. Secondary level students should create a poster on the theme, around the theme essentially, tracing Jamaica's path from colonialism to republic. Tertiary students should compose a photograph interpreting the same theme, that is, tracing Jamaica's path from colonialism to republic. The deadline is November 5, and we've been publicizing the competition for a while, so I hope you've got your entries almost ready. But as a last lick, we decided to have a discussion to hopefully help settle the minds of our entrants, right? We have with us constitutional law expert Dr. Lloyd Barnett, and he's going to help us go deeper into the topic and hopefully help you all get a better understanding of what this decision to become a republic really entails. All right, but before we do that, let's just get an update on what's going on with the competition from our in-house let's call her the project officer for this one, Charnel Henry, our special projects officer. So Charnel, give us a little update on what's going on with the competition entries, what it's like, and so on. Just talk to the people.
Certainly, Vaughn. So we have the competition open until November 5th, as Vaughn shared. So we welcome all entries from primary school students in the essay category, high school students in the poster category, and tertiary level students in the tertiary institution category, the photo category. So we have been receiving entries, and we want to commend those that were early in submitting their entries. But we do want to encourage persons to, if you have not yet completed your piece for submission, please go right ahead and do so. You have until the 5th of November, that's Sunday at midnight, to submit your entries. If you're having any challenges, feel free to reach out to us to by the respective email addresses that we have provided on the website www.jis.gov.jm, and they are heritage essay at jis.gov.jm, heritage poster at jis.gov.jm, and heritage photo at jis.gov.jm. You'll definitely get a quick response from either of the email addresses that you contact us via, and we will assist you with your submissions. If it is that you're encountering challenges on the website, we have alternates for you to submit through. And we want to ensure that everyone who's interested actually gets to make a submission. We want no one to be left behind. So we're working on that for you. And yes, as mentioned, the discussion today will be around the topic, or the entire competition really is around the theme of Echoes of Freedom, Tracing Jamaica's Path from Colonialism to Republic. And each entry allows students to show us what they're thinking about this particular topic, because we want to know what our youth are thinking about us and the move to become a republic. Because at the end of the day, when we become a republic, it will be this new generation of youngsters, the youth, that will be responsible for the country in a couple of years when we do become a republic. So they need to let us know what they're thinking about it, and we want to know that their voice is important, because again, they'll be the leaders of tomorrow when we are a republic.
All right. There you go. So hopefully you guys have enough time. There's still enough time left, a couple of days, but I'd like to think that a lot of them are just now putting the finishing touches on their essays or their posters or their photo. And hopefully with our conversation today with Dr. Barnett, you'll be able to add some more, or maybe you, if necessary, you can make some tweaks and some changes just because you've understood a little bit more, a little bit better how to approach the topic. Maybe you have a better understanding of what actually is going to happen, so that you're in a better position to write good essays, take good photos, and compose some really good posters. All right, people? But let's swing it really into the conversation now. I don't want to keep Dr. Barnett waiting any longer. So Dr. Barnett, the first question I have to ask you is, why does this process seem so so complicated? In the same, like, can't we just pass a line like the prime minister just walks us that hereby declare we are now a republic? You know what I mean? Why? What are the obstacles that would prevent us from just doing something as quote unquote simply as that?
Well, let's start from the beginning. What is a constitution?
Mm.
A constitution is a document which sets out the rules which governs a group of persons, an association, or a nation.
Mm.
So that if you form a club or a group, a debating group, for instance, and you have rules, then that's a constitution which governs the rules which governs how you become a member, who gives the directions, and is a very important thing, because somebody just come up and say, I'm changing the rules, and everything is mixed up. So that what you need is a document which specifies what are the powers, what are the rights, and how you change those if you wish to make a change. So that the Constitution of Jamaica is contained in an order in council, which is a British instrument, which was made at the time of independence, on drafts which were submitted by our leaders, but is in the form of a British instrument. And if we want to change it, we have to go through a very involved process. Now, the fact is that when we became independent, we elected to remain a monarchical country. That is, that the Queen of England, it was then a queen, was our head of state. And we became subjects of that, or we remained as subjects of that head of state. And worse than that, if I might put it that way, the change of that situation from a monarchical, royalist form to a republican form requires the most difficult amendment procedure. That is, you have to have a 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives, which is the elected house, and you have to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate, which is the nominated house. If you do not have a 2/3 majority in the Senate, which is the nominated house, but you get the 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives, then you have to get a special majority of the people in a referendum. So that this change is not only difficult, but is a change that is very important to the people in that they have to approve it.
Naturally, absolutely.
It cannot be effective without the approval of the people. So that when it goes to the referendum, they will be asked, yes or no, do you agree with changing from a monarchical to a republican status? And if they say yes, then the change can be made. If they say no, the change cannot be made.
So I guess I would like to know, to have a better understanding of what the process. You did talk about the importance of having 2/3 majority in government and in the Senate as well, and then the referendum process as well. But are there other? I would imagine there are other stages involved in the process.
Yes, as I said, it's somewhat complicated because you have to pass a law, but that law has to be tabled in the House and wait for a few months before it can be even debated. So when that draft is put on the table of the House and published, we will have an opportunity to examine it and say what we believe is right or wrong about it. And then when it is passed by the two houses and it is to be sent to the people to approve in a referendum, another period has to be waited on in order to get the give the people an opportunity to examine it and then approve it. So the whole process can't take less than 9 months, really, in my view.
9 months. Well, I mean, to be honest, I was expecting theories or something like about 4 years or something like that. So
well, if you include all that we have been going through, 62 years we have been going through it.
Right. So I guess one of the questions is this purely a for lack of a better phrase, a moral decision. I mean, the way that you people like to say, talk about moral victories. You know what
Yes,
I mean? Is
it's
it a moral exercise? Because people might say, what's the point of going through all of this when fundamentally what
yeah.
will change? What
I
will
think,
benefit to the
yeah, I
citizens in a
think
way?
we should not measure the importance of things purely by material factors. You know, whether we get a grant or loan or something like that. We should have a sense of our own national pride. Do we believe in Jamaica? Are we, patriotic Jamaicans? We love our country and believe that we should not be subjected to some other imperial power so that we have to bow to, a person who is the King of England. Why should we be in that position? So that although it cannot be measured in monetary terms, it is, as you say, morally important. It is part of our national heritage, our national spirit, and our aspirations and hopes as a people to have a Jamaican constitution with a Jamaican head of state rather than a monarch.
So, and I mean, I understand that in principle is like, but then what do you say to? I guess maybe those persons, we would call them cynics, and you will always have those persons at the far end of the spectrum when it comes to discussions like these. But I mean, it's useful to hear what they have to say because
Yes.
they tend to kind of make the conversation a lot broader and understand it. But it almost seems like, okay, sure, I guess from a patriotic standpoint, sure, you know what I mean, yeah. But like it almost seems like we're going to go through a lot of steps to essentially remain the same because they don't see it's almost like you're changing the name. They're like, okay, yes, we are a monarchical, or I don't quite know how you classify what we are.
Yeah.
But then we change our thing.
Well, as I say, I think that the moral or the spiritual or the sense of nationhood and the sense of brotherhood and sisterhood that we seek to foster is not unimportant and should not be ignored because we can't measure it in monetary terms or in any sort of immediate practical benefit. And then there is the history, the history is not without significance because very strange that Jamaica became a British colony when there was no monarchy. It was during the Cromwellian period when the Charles I had been deposed. Right. And that word Charles, of course, is also significant because the first Charles was very despotic. And so he was beheaded. And so in that year of what they call the interregnum, the period between kings, when Cromwell was at the head of the British government, when Jamaica was captured, there was no king. But after that year of Cromwell, we then had the second Charles, who was worse than the first Charles, believe it or not, highly immoral. He was one of those persons who sponsored the slave trade. So how can we have a Charles now as our king when we had those first two Charles, one a despot and the other a slave trader? So that even the title itself is not something that we can really tolerate if you look at our history. So that I would think that Jamaica has a very strong moral case for saying that we ought to change and not anymore be a monarchical country paying homage to a king of another country.
Yes, and in so many other ways, I mean, I was just playing devil's advocate with Dr. Barnett because naturally this is what we have to do. But naturally, the idea of, as descendants of Africans and so on who have lived in this country and have experienced the suffering and all the negatives that have come with being a colony of the English government. Well, being a colony, you know what I mean? naturally it best is for us to become and to forge our own destiny on our own as our own independent people, so we can see the benefit, whether you want to classify it as just spiritual or moral or just something that would feel really good. But fundamentally, the value of it, there is true and real meaningful value to it. Now, I know that the process is being steered by our Constitutional Reform Committee, of which you are a part. Can you just give us an idea of where you are now and what work is, what kind of work is being pursued?
Well, we have had a number of public engagements, and persons have also come and made presentations on these various issues. I must say that my own feeling is that the majority of persons are in favor of the three things which really represent the historical, colonial antecedents, history, and background that we have. One is, we have just been discussing the replacement of the monarch by a Jamaican head of state. The second is our constitution is now contained in a British instrument rather than our own Jamaican instrument. And the third is that our final court of appeal is the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, which is a English institution. And we have established in the Caribbean a Caribbean Court of Justice with high credentials and which has the capacity to deal with our appeals. So that in that situation, there are really three very important steps we can take to assert our nationhood and to remove the mantle of imperialism that we have inherited from the colonial days.
All right, so a lot of work is progressing. I mean, individually, I think we shouldn't gloss over those three individual points that you had made, talking about the CCJ, removing the head of state. Which one? You added another one. I just want to make sure I have it right.
And the instrument itself is a British instrument and making a Jamaican instrument made by us in Jamaica.
So let's take them individually and talk about. So first of all, let's talk about creating a truly Jamaican constitution. And for somebody like you, what does that look like? You know what I mean? Because naturally, the constitution we have now was based on the as you mentioned, ordering council from the English government. But what would a truly...
You see, a lot of the constitution will remain as it is, because we have a very fairly detailed instrument. And the instrument deals with the institutions of government, what are their powers, what are their responsibilities, and we have to keep those things. You know, what powers Parliament has, always taxes imposed, you know, what approvals are needed for imposition of the tax on people, the jurisdiction of the courts. All of that is very important to retain, and these are legal features of most constitutions. But there are things we can do, I think, to make it more friendly to the people. The language can be a little less complicated. You know, it should have a preamble which is an expression of national aspirations. You know,
like our pledge.
Yes, yes, very much like our pledge. You know, something like that as a start. The Charter of Rights made some progress in that, but that could still eventually be even improved. We also made some improvements in the sections on citizenship, in which we removed some of the discrimination against citizens. But even that section, which is so people-centered, citizenship is really a people's chapter. You know, that should be written in as simple language as possible.
Definitely agree with you.
You know, so that
Jamaicans would appreciate it.
Yes,
Was a little more readable,
so that
friendly.
I mean, one of the problems with it when you express it in simple language and you get a problem, then you have a lot of interpretations of that simple language because it is so flexible, as you see in the United States, where the original Constitution was so broad-based, and you know, nobody really can say what it really means now, because you have a
Yeah, so
variety
much
of
wide variety,
interpretations.
right. But I mean, how would you? I mean, it's interesting I mentioned that because it then kind of touches on the subject of ownership. I'm gonna hazard be as bold as to say I think many Jamaican citizens don't necessarily feel a sense of ownership over the Constitution, not necessarily because it's an English influenced document, but because it seems very, you know, how can I say it? Like it's above them.
Yes,
It's like this document that kind of
yes,
exists in
yes.
a way that
Well,
you
that's
know,
for a number of
distant.
reasons. It was made in haste and with restricted public participation. And some revisions have been done with more public participation, as in the 1990s Constitutional Commission exercise, which resulted in the improvement in citizenship and the Charter of Rights. But generally speaking, it has not been the subject of much public interchange.
Right.
And as you know, that civics in schools was virtually terminated.
Right.
You know, it wasn't a special subject again. So
and I think too, people only really see the Constitution on these truly ceremonial occasions, like you're opening up Parliament.
So
or,
that
you know,
you see, what is necessary is to have a small compilation of the major points of the Constitution, because you can't keep that document in your pocket. You know,
you really can't. And it
which is
you have to go in search of
yes,
it.
yes.
And once you open it, it starts reading with this language
yes,
so confusing
and
you know distant in some ways. And so I'd like to think that a truly Jamaican constitution is something that is very accessible. Granted, things are accessible now. I mean, in 2023,
yes, you can get it, but on the internet, but then you want to understand it, and you get tired by reading it. So
and you pass the first who's so and henceforth, and you're like, all right, I've had enough. You know what I mean?
But what can be done, of course, is to have booklets which describe it in more general terms and more briefly than the actual legal instrument.
I want you to also quickly, Dr. Barnett, I want you to just reinforce to the layman, to our average Jamaican citizen, the importance of the Constitution. What that document, why is it that I need to care about and make an active effort to know what's in it? And
yeah, that's a very important point. And in that same context, I want to say that we should ensure that we are registered, because the referendum which we are bound to have, if we are going to make this change, requires the vote of the electors, the same persons who vote in general elections, so that people then make sure that they are registered and that they exercise their right to vote, especially the young people who are now just getting on to 18 and will qualify on their 18th birthday, should make sure that they become registered. And then in relation to the participation, they should listen to the discussions like this and other discussions, read things which have been published, and get familiar with the subject, because it is our Constitution. It is what governs what I am bound to do and what I am entitled to. It sets out my duties and it sets out my rights. So that it's critical that I should know what these are.
People always like to say, "But no, my rights."
Yes.
If you don't know your Constitution,
for instance, we have these questions about dress code and hairstyles. How does that is that reflected in the Constitution? It is,
reflecting on modern Jamaica, that was not based on English codes of dress and hair and things like that. These things matter, people, believe me. We have a question online. We're glad for the questions, people. This is why we have Dr. Barnett here. We want you to ask questions. We have him here. Take advantage of his expertise. He is the man to go to. He's the go-to individual when it comes to topics like the Constitution, reform, and so on and so forth. Carla Larson is asking, what implications would there be for Jamaica and our bilateral relations with England if we become a republic?
Well, there is no difference in really the relationship on an international level, because the Commonwealth consists of several countries. I think it's 56, and I think maybe only 10 or 12 have the king as its head of state. So that the Commonwealth Association, which we are not rejecting, and which we have been a very focal part, we have played a vocal part in it even before we became independent. We started the Commonwealth Initiative against apartheid in South Africa, so that we have been very influential. I mean, and then we, in sports, we have been very active. We have participated in a lot of legal, combined in a lot of legal matters with other Commonwealth countries, so that it won't make much change to our relationship as a Commonwealth country. I mean, a lot of people are saying that, you know, there's going to be some detrimental effect because we are no longer part. I mean, Dominica, Barbados, Guyana, they are no worse off because of being a republic.
All right. Miss Henry is asking, will there be any real difference in how we govern once we become a republic? I suspect it has to do with, will things change? Will we know, for argument's sake, this is the most obvious example I can think of. So, for example, if you go to court, and when before court proceedings start, as it is now, people bow and say, "God save the Queen."
No, all that will. I mean, change, right? A lot of the symbolic things will have to go because we are no longer headed by the English king, so that the titles of like Queen's Council or King's Council will go. The Governor General will no longer be Governor General. He will be probably a president, and the symbols that we use will disappear, especially in like the Jamaica Defense Force and so on, which uses still retains some of the monarchical symbols, so that we will be Jamaicanizing a lot of things apart from the instrument itself.
Okay, so there will be changes to the governance. I mean, a lot of the symbolic things actually says will go, and it will just reflect that Jamaica, as it in many cases where documents or so on that reflect the Queen or point to the Queen or hearken to the United Kingdom, so to speak, it will now reflect Jamaica.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess it will be up to us.
Yes, another aspect of your question, of course, is that some people believe a change such as we have been discussing is not enough. You don't have any real change unless you go to what is called a presidential system, where you elect not a prime minister, but you elect a president. And that president, if you follow the American system, is not part of the parliament, but is separate and apart. So it's sort of separation of the executive from the legislative power. But I don't recommend that approach, because when we look at countries which have adopted the republican system as well as the presidential system, then those countries have a very bad record of dictatorship, military interventions, poor economic performance. And the best performing countries in the world are the countries with what is really the parliamentary cabinet system, in which you have a prime minister who is responsible to parliament and has to explain to parliament what are the policies and cannot pass any laws or impose any taxes unless the people's representative approves of it.
And then that person is, to a lesser, not necessarily overseen, but then above that person is a president, some kind of head of state,
But the important thing about it is the responsibility to Parliament and therefore to the people on a continuous basis and not as a separate institution.
All right. A quick question from Ms. Henry again. She's asking, will the coat of arms be affected?
That's something we have to consider. As I was saying, some of our symbolic things need to be re-examined. The coat of arms tend to be more Jamaican than many other symbolic things, because it's has the crocodile or the alligator and so on, the rhinos and so. But it can be re-examined. As I say, we need a preamble, which is Jamaican. We need we might look at our coat of arms or national honors and so on. Need to be re-examined too and updated. So I think that if we become a republic, it will not be the end of the reform. It will be the beginning of a new aspect of Jamaicanization.
So the door opens for us to take a true look at a lot of the things that we have now, which is great when you think about it. Now, as I expected, we have a comment online from George Edwards. George, thank you so much for your comment. Who's coming? He says he's watching from Birmingham, England. Curiously, the place that we're trying to divorce ourselves from. But George is saying, okay, right, focus on improving the Jamaican economy. UK already ripped off Jamaica and so on. What his comment reflects is the question of why now? Why do this now when we have so many other pressing things that we
But I don't think, this is a question frequently asked, but I don't think doing this now should divert us from the challenges of the socio-economic problems of Jamaica. It doesn't stand in the way of our making progress on the economic and financial fronts. It might give us an incentive in that we have greater pride in ourselves and become less dependent on other people and try to build up our own economy and our own social structures. Because there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot we have done, but we have not done enough. And I don't believe this attitude that we should be dependent on other persons is the right attitude. If we can get help in relation to investments, in relation to technical skills, then everybody is looking for that. China gets a whole lot of things from the United States in relation to technical capabilities, so that even the most advanced countries are seeking to get assistance where it is available. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Other countries in the Commonwealth, as I say, which are not monarchical, have dropped the royalist cycle. Those countries also continue to have a good relationship with the United Kingdom and to build up their economy and social structures.
Right, so Dr. Barnett is saying that the two can exist, the two can coexist quite peacefully. We can pursue the road to republic while even as we focus on economical challenges, overcoming our economic challenges, social challenges, etc., etc. Both can, in his humble opinion, and I would like to say that his opinion carries a whole lot of weight. If he thinks so, I'd like to think we can do this. And as we say, we're a little bit with Tallow. I don't think we can. That's not beyond us. We can do this, right? And he said it will take about nine months thereabouts. We have a question from YouTube saying, KJ Martin, thank you KJ for your question, is asking, will we be finally removing the savings clause from the Constitution? What is your opinion on this matter?
I believe, and in fact as a member of the Constitutional Commission of the on the previous exercise, in which we recommended that the savings clauses should be removed and that it should be left to the development of our jurisprudence or historical development as to what laws we continue to have, and they must conform with our constitutional principles. Now, most of that recommendation was accepted, as I said earlier, and it is only in relation to two matters that we have a savings clause, unlike, say, Trinidad, which retained the general savings clause, and that relates to same-sex marriage. We say that marriage means what it does. The savings clause preserves marriage, and in relation to homosexuality, there is a savings clause in relation to the criminal offense of buggery. But other than that, our Charter of Rights has laid down principles which are to be interpreted in accordance with principles which are accepted in democratic states worldwide.
All right, So let's touch now on let's keep the questions coming, people. Dr. Barnett is here. He's ready to answer your questions. We have a little time left, but just any question you have, anything that you've been mulling over in your mind, just drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you and be able to press this issue a lot further and just have more information and have wider discussions about it. Now, we had mentioned before that essentially the process, in one of the three notable ways in which we'll be able to, track the process, so to speak, is we'll see the Jamaicanization of the Constitution, removing our head of state, and then transition, hopefully, to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, touching on removing our head of state, well, not necessarily removing, but readjusting, let's call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So what will happen is that we'll no longer have a governor general by title. The title will no longer refer, the head of state will no longer be the governor general in title. So, and as you had touched on it previously before, let's go again into what would replace the governor general, what that structure would essentially.
If the essential constitutional structure is not changed, and I don't see any possibility of the essential structure being changed, because you would never get a referendum to approve that.
Right.
If that structure is not changed, what you will have is a formal head of state, as we have now. But we have developed a compromise or an adjustment of that formality so that there are some special powers and discretions which are given to that head of state. For instance, that head of state, after consultation, appoints some members of, say, the Electoral Commission, because you wanted people to be independent and not appointed by the politicians. So since the head of state is independent, you gave him the power to appoint 3 members of that commission. And the same thing for the Integrity Commission. So there are some, in Jamaica, we have really developed a technique of utilizing this office to create some very important constitutional principles, in that some institutions which needs to be non-partisan, to be kept out of politics, are appointed by that person in that person's discretion, so that the retention of the former head of state in Jamaica has this added feature that there are some powers and discretions which are exercised by that person, which we do not really wish politicians who are in the political struggle to be utilizing. Yes,
you don't want to have a politically
because we're looking for independent organizations.
So I guess the question, one of the biggest knocks on the Governor General, as people like to say, is that his post, or the post of Governor General, is mostly ceremonial. Now, I guess in process of Jamaicanizing our head of state, or making is there consideration being given to expanding the role of the head of state in terms of providing additional duties and responsibilities?
Well, the duties and responsibilities are such as I have described as justifying the existence of the post, because if it was merely ceremonial, then people would say, but it might be good to have a ceremonial head of state, but the costs really don't justify it. But because you can give these additional powers which are so sensitive to a person who is above partisan politics, then it becomes justified. And it's a balancing of costs against the benefit, but I believe that the benefits are justify the costs.
No, I agree with you. When you explain it like that, in terms of having that person who sits separate and apart from partisan politics and is able to weigh in. But I guess the question is more along the lines of, okay, how much power, in the sense that would the head of state be able to be in a position to, for example, let's say there is a clear, both sides are, let's say political parties are those who form the government, and the opposition they are on,
You see, we have not had the experience of a head of state of this type being involved in any controversial decision making, though it is possible. There have been 1 or 2 little incidents in Trinidad and Tobago, which there's a former head of state, in which there was, some concerns about how power was exercised. Let me give you an example. For instance, there was a case in Trinidad in which, after the elections, there was an equality of votes between the government party who was going out and the opposition who were coming in. So that the question of who should be the prime minister, they arose, and they, contrary to what I think was the right thing, the prime minister appointed the leader of the opposition who was coming in as the prime minister. But, he justified it on the basis that there's an indication of a desire for change, but also there, in my view, there was an indication not to change. But other than some exceptional circumstances, the powers, although important, have not caused any conflict or controversies in Jamaica.
No,
You mean,
I was
so-
wondering if we are open to the possibility of maybe expanding the role or adding new.
Well, you see, the further you go with the role is the further you may take the risk of having a controversial situation.
I suppose you're
you
right.
know.
I guess maybe.
So you have to be very careful that you don't get that person involved, because at the end of the day, you want that person to be representative of national unity, to be the person who, at an official ceremony, represents Jamaica.
Right.
Now, after an election, it's very difficult for a prime minister, however popular, to say he's representing all of Jamaica. So that the value of that person is the image of national unity that that person provides.
All right, fair enough. I will defer to you. You are indeed one of the KJ Martin, another question from KJ Martin on YouTube saying, have we considered the South African presidential model, or more so Irish presidential model, where citizens still get to vote for their president?
Yeah, we have considered it. In fact, it's being considered today by the CRC, which I'm absent from because of this program. Because we have looked at the various countries and what they have, and the fact that you can seek to get public acclamation by having a vote in favor of that person, but the reverse is also true. You get bitter public dispute, and that person who you want to represent national unity has come in a very highly competitive thing, so that it is not an easy one to decide on. But I believe that certainly if we have a strong party system and the political parties who are represented in Parliament, they are the people's choice. If those persons select someone, then I don't think it is necessary. Assuming, for instance, that you have 2/3 of the members of Parliament voting in favor of that person, I don't think it's necessary to go to an election, because those are the persons who are going to stimulate interest in the elections. So that if the person is essentially a formal head of state, then the business of a national election really is unjustified.
Okay. So I guess more on KJ Martin, we can keep looking at. Eventually we'll see what we decide, but it's useful to add these dimensions so that we can, there's fodder for the committee to keep discussing and going on and so on and so forth. Keep the questions coming, even though we're trying to move to a wrap. The last issue we talked about was the Caribbean Court of Justice in terms of Jamaica, moving away from the Privy Council, UK-based.
Yeah, the Caribbean Court of Justice is something that we helped to create. It is a court established by a treaty between the CARICOM countries. It has two types of jurisdictions. It has the original jurisdiction, which interprets the treaty and trade relations and movement of persons. We had a very historic Jamaican case dealing with free movement of persons. And so that is what is called its basic, ordinary, first instance jurisdiction. It is also a final court of appeal, which was set up in order to replace the Privy Council. And so far, Guyana, Dominica, Barbados, have acceded to the jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice in its appellate jurisdiction. The court has a very special feature, and that is that it is not controlled by any government, neither directly or indirectly. There's a Judicial Services Commission responsible for the appointment of judges. There's a trust fund responsible for the financing of the court. The court is made up of persons from different jurisdictions, and so that its independence is more secure than the independence of any other court I can think of. Okay. So that we have a very, very special body which we should adopt once we are satisfied at its standards. Mm-hmm. Now it has had 18 years of existence, and there's not one person who can say that its decisions are not of the highest quality. It is highly respected throughout the Commonwealth, and in fact beyond the Commonwealth, so that our failure to adopt its jurisdiction is not justified. I haven't heard any rational argument advanced as to why it is that we have a court that we have created, which is of the highest quality, and yet we do not want to use it, and we have to go to England. And going to England is not only more expensive, it is prohibitive. I went to England for a client in May, and I had to be getting visa and running around the place, getting all sorts of letters. I mean, I went to England to study. I studied in England. I spent 4 years altogether in England. I can't go back there without a visa for 2 weeks to represent my client.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, you know, as devil's advocate once more, somebody would say, well, that's one of the ideal situations. Admittedly, it's far and visas and so on, but the fact that they are truly independent in the sense that they are all the way away, they would be able to weigh in on our case with a truly independent and quote-unquote objective fashion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, independence is a question of integrity, and the integrity of our judges can be questioned. Independence can also be a question of your motivations. What are the social influences under which you operate? Many of those persons have operated in social circumstances which are not in our best interest. So that I don't think they have any advantage over the Caribbean judges.
So, as we can see, having gone through there, in moving through all three of these 10 poll items, insofar as the CCJ removing the head of state and changing, Jamaicanizing the constitution, just give us, I guess what I would like, for lack of a better phrase, a status report, or how are we progressing in each of these, how the discussions around each of these progressing.
Well, I believe the discussions have progressed fairly well and positively in relation to the first two items, namely the abolition of the monarchy, because I think the recent opinion polls show a high level of public support for it, and the two political parties represented in Parliament are in favor.
Full support over.
So that that is okay. The more technical point about the Jamaicanization of the Constitution having its own instrument, I haven't heard any opposition to that. I mean, people say that it might be difficult or technically difficult, not difficult in principle. So that those two. The third one, of course, the Caribbean Court of Justice, we have arguments which I have sought to state very briefly in favor of it, but I have seen the arguments against it, because, the government has not come out. I mean, the opinions polls, as I say, are strongly in favor of it. We haven't heard the articulation, expression of any real reasons why we shouldn't adopt its appellate jurisdiction.
I guess as we kind of bring things on, I only really have one last issue before I would like you to just make one more, general statement. Consultation. I know that you said prior to even us going on air and stuff, you're saying that there have been other public engagements and so on. Talk to me about the plans that you guys have, or the ways in which you're making sure that members of the public are able to express their opinions about this topic.
Okay, well, there's a Government of Jamaica website. There's a Ministry of Constitutional and Legal Affairs website, on which persons can post their views. They can look it up, and I don't quite remember it now, but it shouldn't be difficult to find us. Look for Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Let me give you a hand with that. It's mlca.gov.jm. That's the
Right.
ministry's
And you
website.
can make any comments or submit any suggestions you have, any proposals you have for consideration, and it will be considered. We also entertain representatives from various organizations or even individuals who come to the meetings and make presentations. And we also have town hall meetings, and that has fallen back because of the weather and so on. But we plan to continue with the town hall meetings where we meet people in different parishes and have discussions with them.
Alright, so there you have it, people. There's a lot of work being done. I mean, as we work with the JIS, and actually we see all that's happening. There's a lot of work being undertaken to ensure that more persons are aware of what this process entails, what's required of them, just providing more information to help you understand and make a useful, make a decision on how and support of this process. And I'm not going to put words in Dr. Barnett's mouth. I'm just going to give you the last word in terms of just reinforcing the value or the ultimate goal and objective of us going on this road to republic status.
My important conclusion is this is our business, and we must participate. We must make sure that we are registered so when the referendum comes we can vote, and that we do vote. But we should participate in the discussions, whether in schools, in churches, in citizens associations, in clubs. We should participate in the discussions and make it our own, so that when the changes come we can embrace it and be proud of what we have achieved.
Right, and once again, I'm gonna go there with you. I just want you to reinforce, from the, people might call it moral, but just from the nationalistic and patriotic sense, why are we choosing and going down this road to become a republic?
Because the monarchical form, which we have carried for centuries, is inconsistent with our national pride and our national sense of well-being, and the historical features of that monarchical form are repugnant to our sense of nationhood and our humanity.
All right, there you have it. If we want to move forward in truly as an independent Jamaican, as Jamaicans, to embody everything that means as a Jamaican, we truly have to stand on our own feet as a nation and become and follow through the process of become truly and officially independent. All right, people. With that said, I think it's time for us.
Best wishes.
Thanks to everyone who tuned into our discussion, especially those of you sending your questions and your comments. And if you have a question and we didn't answer it in our discussion, not to worry. We'll be going through afterwards and picking through our questions so that we can get you the right information. All right. Now remember, our audience plays a major part in our show. If there is anyone particularly like us to have in the studio, let us know. We'll try to have that person in the studio as soon as possible. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok. Jamaica Information Service. You can't miss us. We're right there. All right. We do this every week live on Facebook and now YouTube. I've been your host, Vaughn Davis, and this has been Studio 58 Live. Thank you so much for joining us, and please have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.